In a galaxy dominated by conquest and unchallenged strength, the Thyxar Empire believed they had seen it all, until they encountered Earth. A seemingly insignificant, chaotic planet, home to a species they deemed weak, frail, and doomed to self-destruction. But as the Thyxar Council prepares for their inevitable invasion, one scientist discovers a chilling truth hidden beneath humanity's flaws. Earth's greatest weapon isn't its technology, it's the unyielding will of its people to survive, adapt, and rise against all odds. Will the Thyxars realize their grave mistake before it's too late? The Thyxar Empire, a vast and ancient civilization, had spent millennia expanding across the cosmos, conquering countless worlds. Their empire stretched over galaxies, built on a foundation of unmatched military might, advanced technology, and an unwavering belief in their superiority. The Thyxars were a species accustomed to dominance. They had faced and crushed many civilizations, seeing no challenge in their path. To them, conquest was not a complex or difficult task, but a routine operation. The Thyxar Empire had perfected the art of warfare and colonization, utilizing technologies so advanced that most other species could not even comprehend them. Their weapons and defense systems were far beyond the capabilities of any planet they had encountered. Their forms were nearly indestructible, further reinforcing their belief in their invincibility. The Thyxars were not just conquerors. They were an unstoppable force, and they saw the universe as something they could control with ease. In their vast history, the Thyxars had never been bested. Each world they encountered seemed to fall in the same predictable pattern. The native species would be weak, either too technologically primitive or socially fragmented to mount any meaningful resistance. The Thyxars would land on the planet, subjugate its inhabitants, and strip the world of its resources. The conquered species were deemed weak and incapable, easily dominated without a second thought. The process of invasion and occupation was, for the Thyxars, a mere formality. Each conquest added another star to their empire, and the cycle continued without interruption. However, this unchallenged dominance led the Thyxars to believe that their superiority was absolute, and they became overconfident in their ability to subdue any world they targeted. This arrogance eventually led them to underestimate the resilience and unpredictability of other species. In their eyes, Earth was no different from the countless worlds they had conquered before, a planet full of primitive life forms, seemingly weak and disorganized, ripe for the picking. The Thyxars believed that Earth would be another easy conquest, reinforcing their perception of themselves as an invincible and indomitable empire. From the Thyxars' perspective, Earth was a seemingly insignificant planet, a small, blue world orbiting an ordinary star at the edge of the galaxy. The Thyxar Council, comprised of their highest-ranking strategists and scientists, had studied the planet from a distance. Through their advanced monitoring systems, they observed the broadcasts and news reports from Earth, which painted a picture of a species embroiled in conflict, environmental degradation, and social turmoil. To the Thyxars, this was not a sign of strength but weakness. The Thyxars' initial assessment of humanity was shaped by what they saw on the surface, a chaotic and fractured society, perpetually at war with itself. The news reports showed ongoing civil unrest, political instability, and environmental destruction. Natural disasters were frequent, and humanity's technological advancements seemed to be causing more harm than good, polluting the air, oceans, and land. This painted a picture of a species on the brink of collapse, one that could not even manage its own planet, let alone defend itself against a technologically superior alien race. In addition to these social and environmental issues, the Thyxars observed humanity's history of violent conflict. They saw the wars, famines, and civil strife that had plagued Earth for centuries. The planet had been torn apart by internal disputes, and the species had failed to achieve any lasting unity. The Thyxar scientists noted that humans had yet to come together as a single, cohesive civilization, despite their immense potential. Their history was marked by division, and their world seemed to be on the verge of self-destruction, with no unified vision for the future. To the Thyxars, These flaws were not just signs of weakness, but evidence that Earth was not capable of challenging their empire. Their technology, though advanced by human standards, was deemed primitive in comparison to the Thyxar's nearly invincible arsenal. The Thyxar strategists dismissed humanity's weapons as inadequate, their cities vulnerable to invasion, and their biology fragile. With these observations, the Thyxar Council concluded that Earth posed no threat to their conquest, and the planet would be an easy acquisition, just another resource-rich world to add to their expanding empire. The Thyxar's dismissal of humanity's potential was rooted in their belief in their own supremacy. The galaxy, to them, was filled with lesser species that could be subdued with little effort. Earth, with its disjointed and frail inhabitants, seemed to fit the same mold. The Thyxar Council saw humanity as an obstacle that could be swiftly removed, and they anticipated little resistance in their mission to terraform the planet and strip it of its resources. They underestimated the complexity of humanity, unable to see beyond the surface-level chaos to recognize the strength hidden beneath. As part of their standard invasion protocol, the Thyxar Empire was required to conduct a thorough atmospheric scan of Earth before proceeding with their planned conquest. This was a routine step they had followed for countless worlds, designed to identify any environmental hazards, such as harmful radiation, dangerous pollutants, or any other potential threats that could compromise the invasion. The Thyxars had never faced significant challenges from this task, and they assumed Earth would be no different. However, this seemingly trivial procedure would ultimately change the course of their decision-making. Vey, a junior scientist on the Thyxar research team, was assigned to analyze Earth's atmospheric data. She observed the usual traces of pollution, carbon dioxide, and greenhouse gases, indicative of industrialization and human activity. These compounds were familiar to her, as they had been found in similar concentrations on other primitive worlds. However, as she dug deeper into the data, she began to notice irregularities that stood out from the standard environmental patterns she had seen on other planets. There were traces of chemical compounds that did not align with natural atmospheric processes, suggesting an unnatural interference with Earth's environment. What struck Vey as particularly unusual were the residues of nuclear detonations and radiation, remnants of humanity's experiments with weapons of mass destruction. The presence of these substances was unexpected. The Thyxars had encountered primitive species before, but none had developed such destructive technologies, let alone used them to manipulate their own atmosphere in this way. Vey had always believed that humans were weak, fragile, chaotic creatures. Yet the data painted a different picture. It revealed a species that, despite their apparent fragility, had pushed the boundaries of their own survival by harnessing forces that could destroy them. This discovery was troubling for Vey. She had always seen humanity as a vulnerable species, one that would likely perish in the face of a superior force like the Thyxar Empire. But now, after reviewing the data, she began to understand that humans were far more complex than the Thyxars had assumed. They had not only been struggling to survive, but had actively reshaped their world, turning it into a weapon capable of self-destruction. This was not mere reckless industrialization. It was a deliberate manipulation of their environment, a dangerous game that humans seemed willing to play. The realization that humans were capable of such actions unnerved Vey. She saw in this a sign of resilience, even if it was driven by desperation. As she continued to analyze the data, Vey became increasingly concerned about the Thyxar Council's blind dismissal of humanity. She knew that her findings, though groundbreaking, would likely be ignored. The Council was set in its ways, accustomed to seeing the universe in a simple, black-and-white view of conquerable and conquered. But Vey saw something different in the data, a hidden strength in humanity's willingness to manipulate their environment to survive. Her discovery could not be ignored, and she understood that it could have profound implications for the fate of Earth. If the Thyxars underestimated this resilience, they risked underestimating the humans themselves. Despite the unsettling data she had uncovered about humanity's resilience and dangerous technological advancements, Vey understood that convincing the Thyxar Council to alter their plans for Earth would be an enormous challenge. The Thyxar Empire had conquered countless worlds without significant resistance, and their high-ranking officials, particularly the supreme strategist, were dismissive of any potential threat from a species as seemingly primitive as humanity. Vei's position as a junior scientist within the Empire also meant that her voice would likely hold little weight, especially against the entrenched beliefs of the Council members who were confident in their overwhelming superiority. Vei prepared to present her findings to the Council, knowing that doing so would risk her career and reputation within the Thyxar hierarchy. The Thyxar Empire was highly rigid and hierarchical, and challenging their decisions, especially on something as monumental as the invasion of Earth, was considered a dangerous move. The Council had already made their decision, convinced that Earth was simply another world to be conquered, its inhabitants no different from countless others they had subdued. They had been planning the invasion for some time, and to suggest anything contrary to their plan was to risk being viewed as insubordinate. As Vei presented her analysis, she made sure to emphasize not just the environmental data, but the broader implications of what this information suggested. She explained how humanity had transformed its own atmosphere, despite the apparent risks, and pointed out that their weapons of mass destruction were not the sign of a weak species, but of one willing to push the limits of its own survival. While the Council had dismissed Earth as a resource-rich but easily conquerable planet, Vei argued that humanity's ability to adapt and innovate in the face of overwhelming odds was something that could not be overlooked. To her, this was proof that humans were far more dangerous than the Thyxars had assumed. However, her warning was met with skepticism and even derision. The Supreme Strategist, a high-ranking member of the Council, dismissed her conclusions with disdain. He saw humanity's environmental destruction and fractured society as evidence of their inevitable downfall. He believed that their inability to unify, their constant warring, and their frailty would make them an easy target. In his eyes, the pollution and wars on Earth were signs of weakness, not resilience. He and the rest of the Council, blinded by their own sense of superiority, believed that these flaws would ultimately make humanity incapable of mounting any serious defense. Despite the resistance from the Council, Vei stood firm in her position. She understood that her warning could save Earth from destruction, but she also realized that she had to present her argument with the utmost care. She expanded on her analysis, highlighting humanity's history of survival against impossible odds, how they had overcome plagues, famines, and even the devastating ice ages. She explained that their resilience came not from their technological advances or their physical strength, but from an indomitable will to survive, a trait the Thyxars had never fully understood in any species they had encountered. Vei's conviction and her passionate defense of humanity's potential ultimately began to cause a shift in the Council's perspective. As she detailed the human capacity to innovate and adapt in the face of crisis, she introduced the idea that their division and chaos might be precisely what made them dangerous. Humanity had learned to survive even in their fractured state, and when faced with existential threats, they could unite in ways that other species, particularly the Thyxars, could not anticipate. This was not just a matter of strength in battle. It was about a species' ability to survive through innovation, adaptation, and unity in the most dire of circumstances. Vei's presentation was met with growing unease among the Council members. Her arguments had challenged their assumptions, and for the first time, they began to question whether they had misjudged Earth's inhabitants. Would underestimating humanity be the fatal mistake that led to their downfall? Despite their initial reluctance, the Council had been forced to consider the possibility that they had overlooked something crucial in their calculations. The risk of underestimating humanity's resilience had now been laid before them, and the fate of Earth hung in the balance. After Vei presented her findings to the Thyxar Council, the reaction was overwhelmingly dismissive. The Thyxar Empire had a long history of dominating and subjugating weaker species, and the idea that a primitive planet like Earth could pose any significant threat to their vast and technologically superior empire seemed laughable to the Council. For millennia, the Thyxars had conquered worlds with ease, and they viewed Earth as no different from the countless others they had already subdued. Humanity's wars, pollution, and fractured society were all seen as signs of inherent weakness. To them, it was a world on the brink of destruction, one that would soon collapse under its own flaws, making it an easy target for invasion and exploitation. The supreme strategist, who held a position of immense influence within the council, was particularly dismissive of Vey's analysis. His view of humanity was rooted in the idea that their history was one of failure, endless wars, environmental destruction, and an inability to unite. He saw these as irrefutable signs of a species doomed to self-destruction. The Thyxars had a deeply ingrained belief in their own technological and biological superiority, which made it difficult for them to comprehend that a species like humanity, frail and disorganized, could pose any real danger. In his eyes, the very fact that humanity had not already unified and solved their internal conflicts was proof that they were incapable of mounting any serious resistance against the Thyxars. The other members of the council shared this sentiment. They viewed humanity as a species that had failed to harness their potential, trapped in endless cycles of self-destruction. Their technology was rudimentary, their biology weak, and their planet unstable. The Thyxars believed that Earth was merely a resource to be exploited, and the idea that humanity could adapt or innovate in the face of an overwhelming external threat seemed absurd to them. To the Council, humanity's inability to unite was evidence of their inherent weakness, and they were certain that this flaw would make them an easy conquest. Despite the compelling data Vey presented, including evidence of humanity's attempts to manipulate their own atmosphere and develop weapons of mass destruction, the Thyxar Council's conclusion remained unchanged. They had seen similar signs of desperation in other primitive species that had crumbled when faced with true power. The Thyxars had always relied on their superior technology and strength to conquer, and they had never encountered a species that had proven to be more resilient than their expectations. In their arrogance, they assumed that humanity's internal chaos and environmental degradation would be their downfall. They had no reason to believe that the species they were preparing to conquer had any other potential beyond their technological inadequacies. Vey's attempts to shift the Council's perspective only deepened the divide between her and the ruling body. Despite her arguments, which outlined humanity's history of survival against all odds, such as their recovery from pandemics, natural disasters, and the Ice Ages, the Council remained unconvinced. They still saw humanity as weak, with no true capacity for long-term survival. Their internal divisions, endless wars, and environmental destruction painted a picture of a species that would inevitably collapse under the weight of its own failures. In the eyes of the Council, these were not signs of resilience. They were signs of inevitable extinction. The Thyxar Council's dismissive stance towards humanity's potential highlights their profound misunderstanding of the species they were about to invade. They underestimated the very qualities that made humanity dangerous: their ability to adapt and survive, their capacity for innovation, and their unyielding will to endure even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The Council, blinded by their own superiority complex, failed to see that humanity's true strength did not lie in their technological advances or physical prowess, but in their relentless drive to survive and their ability to overcome internal divisions when faced with existential threats. This would prove to be a fatal mistake, as the Thyxars would soon realize. But for now, they clung to their belief that humanity was nothing more than a primitive species on the brink of annihilation. Despite the Thyxar Council's initial rejection of her findings, they remained steadfast in her belief that humanity's true strength lay in their adaptability, resilience, and capacity to survive against all odds. She knew that challenging the Council's authority was a risky move, but the gravity of the situation compelled her to continue pressing her case. Vey understood that if the Thyxar Council ignored the data she had presented, particularly the evidence of humanity's environmental manipulation and technological advancements, they would be making a catastrophic mistake. She realized that what she was proposing was not just a defense of humanity's potential, but also a warning about the dangers of underestimating a species that had survived countless catastrophes throughout history. Vey's persistence came from her recognition of a fundamental truth about humanity. While their technology may have seemed primitive compared to the Thyxars, their ability to adapt to changing conditions, overcome internal chaos, and innovate in the face of overwhelming challenges made them far more dangerous than the Council realized. To her, humanity's greatest strength wasn't just their inventions or their tools, but their indomitable will to survive. This resilience had allowed them to thrive in environments that should have destroyed them, from their ability to overcome plagues and famines to their capacity for creating civilizations from nothing. This was not a species that could be easily dismissed or conquered. It was a species that fought for its survival, no matter the odds. They began to delve deeper into the data she had gathered, focusing not just on the pollutants in the atmosphere, but on the larger picture of humanity's capacity to survive under extreme pressure. She presented examples of humanity's greatest achievements in the face of destruction, how they had come together in times of war or crisis, setting aside their differences to defeat common threats. This was a critical point that they knew the Council had failed to recognize. Humanity's survival wasn't based on unity in the traditional sense, as the Thyxars understood it. Instead, humanity had learned to survive in chaos and division, to adapt and innovate in ways that were far more unpredictable and flexible than the rigid structure the Thyxars relied upon. Her argument was that humanity's disunity and constant internal strife were not signs of weakness, but rather indicators of an ability to adapt and innovate when necessary. They explained that humans didn't need perfect unity to thrive. They could function even in the most fractured of states. The Council's dismissal of humanity's survival mechanisms as signs of weakness failed to account for the fact that humans had survived despite all their flaws. This was a species that had faced extinction numerous times, whether due to pandemics, natural disasters, or wars, and still managed to overcome them. The very fact that humanity had turned their planet into a weapon, reshaping their atmosphere and pushing their biological limits, was a testament to their unique survival instincts. At this point, Vei's tone began to shift from analytical to impassioned. She emphasized that humanity's ability to adapt wasn't just a quirk of their biology or environment. It was a fundamental trait that allowed them to thrive where others would have perished. Her final point was perhaps the most powerful. If humanity could survive the massive destruction they had inflicted upon their own planet, what did that say about their resilience? The idea that a species capable of surviving self-inflicted wounds on such a scale could be easily conquered was a grave miscalculation. If the Thyxars underestimated this capacity, they risked underestimating humanity's potential for resistance. It was this point that began to make the Thyxar Council question their previous assumptions. Slowly, the skeptical tone that had defined the Council's response began to soften. For the first time, they started to consider the possibility that humanity's apparent weaknesses might not be weaknesses at all. The more Vei pressed her case, the more the Council realized that they had made a critical error in dismissing humanity. She had planted a seed of doubt, forcing them to reconsider their strategy and reevaluate the true nature of humanity's strength. While it was still too early for the Council to change their stance completely, they had succeeded in opening their eyes to a reality that they had previously ignored. Humanity was not a species on the brink of extinction, but one capable of surviving, and even thriving, against insurmountable odds. This shift in perspective was crucial, as it marked the beginning of a reevaluation of the Thyxars' approach to humanity. They were no longer certain that their conquest of Earth would be as effortless as they had originally believed. Instead, they were starting to question whether humanity might prove to be far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Vei's determination and her ability to challenge the Council's assumptions would ultimately play a pivotal role in altering the course of history, not just for Earth, but for the entire Thyxar Empire. As Vei continued to press her argument and present her findings, a subtle but significant shift began to take place within the Thyxar Council. Initially dismissive and condescending toward humanity, the Council members slowly started to reconsider their stance. While they had originally viewed humanity as a fragile, primitive species with little technological prowess, Vei's analysis began to challenge that perception. She had carefully detailed humanity's incredible ability to adapt, endure, and innovate, even in the face of destruction. These were qualities that the Thyxars, with their superior strength and technological advancements, had never had to develop in their own civilization. The Thyxar Empire had conquered countless worlds, but none had shown the same kind of resilience and ingenuity that humanity possessed. As Vey outlined the remarkable feats of human survival, she highlighted their capacity to adapt to catastrophic events like ice ages, pandemics, and wars. These were not just simple survival instincts, but deeply ingrained behaviors that had allowed humanity to overcome near extinction multiple times throughout history. She pointed to humanity's ability to rebuild civilizations from the ashes, to rise from the depths of their own destructive tendencies and start anew. Even when they faced the brink of annihilation, be it through war, famine, or disease, they found ways to come together, adapt, and survive. Humanity's power, she argued, was not in its physical strength or technological superiority, but in its ability to survive and thrive in adversity. Vey's argument about humanity's remarkable resilience made the Thyxar Council pause and reconsider their initial decision. The Thyxars had never encountered a species like humanity, one that was so adept at turning chaos into an opportunity for growth. While many of the species the Thyxars had previously conquered were easily subdued due to their lack of adaptability or innovative spirit, humanity's resilience was unlike anything the Thyxars had predicted. Their ability to reshape their environment, especially in ways that could be self-destructive, proved that they were not a species to be taken lightly. This was an important realization for the Council, as it began to understand that humanity's greatest strength lay in its unpredictability. The Thyxars, accustomed to subjugating weaker species that crumbled under pressure, had never encountered a species that could thrive under the very conditions that would have destroyed others. Humanity's ability to cooperate and innovate in times of crisis was something the Thyxars had never experienced. While the Thyxar society thrived on unity and predictability, humanity's very capacity to survive in chaos, whether through wars, environmental disasters, or societal divisions, made them inherently dangerous. Humanity's survival instincts pushed them to adapt and overcome their flaws, to forge new paths even when faced with insurmountable challenges. The most significant breakthrough in the Council's perspective came when Vey highlighted the human ability to cooperate during moments of existential threat. Despite humanity's often chaotic and fractured nature, when faced with an external threat, they had historically been able to come together, set aside differences, and focus on the survival of the species as a whole. This quality, the ability to find common ground in the face of disaster, was something that made humanity not just a threat but a force to be reckoned with. The Thyxars had never been forced to unite in such a way, and it was this very trait that made humanity far more dangerous than they had first realized. At this point, the Council began to reassess their plans. Recall, the supreme strategist, who had previously been one of the most vocal proponents of Earth's easy conquest, began to show signs of hesitation. His earlier confidence was replaced with uncertainty. Vey's argument had struck a chord, forcing him to reconsider the nature of humanity's resilience. His dismissive attitude, once so steadfast, began to falter as he questioned whether humanity's strength lay in their physical capabilities or in their unparalleled ability to adapt, survive, and innovate when the situation demanded it. The Council's shift in perspective marked a turning point. They began to realize that humanity was not just a weak, chaotic species, but one that could withstand and overcome unimaginable adversity. For the first time, the Thyxars were forced to acknowledge that humanity was not a species to be underestimated, and that their conquest of Earth might not be as straightforward as they had originally thought. The very unpredictability that made humanity seem weak also made them a dangerous adversary. Vey, in her quiet moment of hope, realized that she had planted a seed of doubt within the Council. While the Thyxars had originally seen humanity as a species on the brink of collapse, they were now beginning to understand that humanity's strength was not found in their technology or military power, but in their unyielding will to survive. This shift in the Council's thinking set the stage for a broader reevaluation of their strategy, and it was clear that the Thyxars had underestimated humanity in ways they couldn't yet fully comprehend. The realization that humanity's true strength lay in their resilience would prove to be a crucial turning point in the fate of Earth. The crucial turning point in the Thyxar Council's decision-making process came when Vey, the junior scientist, succeeded in shifting the Council's perspective on humanity. While initially resistant and dismissive of her analysis, the more Vey elaborated on humanity's extraordinary capacity for resilience and survival, the more the Thyxar leaders began to question their previous assumptions. What started as a routine assessment of a weak species soon turned into a deep contemplation of humanity's hidden strength, a strength that even the Thyxars, with their superior technologies and countless conquests, had never fully encountered before. The most significant moment of doubt came when Recall, the supreme strategist, who had been adamant about humanity's inferiority, finally began to reconsider his stance. Recall had initially viewed humanity's frailty, both in terms of their technology and their biology, as an advantage for the Thyxars. He had dismissed them as nothing more than another easily conquerable species, their internal strife, wars, and pollution serving as proof of their inevitable collapse. However, as Vey's arguments regarding humanity's adaptability and their ability to endure against all odds sank in, Recall's previously unwavering confidence began to waver. His skepticism toward the potential of humanity to unite under an external threat started to show cracks. The Thyxars had never encountered a species capable of adapting and thriving in such chaotic conditions. To the Thyxar leaders, the prospect of facing a species that could rapidly change, cooperate in times of crisis, and even rebuild itself after massive destruction was both unnerving and unprecedented. Vey's argument about humanity's ability to not just survive, but innovate in the face of destruction was the catalyst for this shift in thinking. She painted a picture of a species that, while appearing chaotic and divided, possessed an intrinsic ability to innovate and adapt in ways that would be difficult for any external force, even one as powerful as the Thyxars, to predict. Humanity's history was marked by the ability to learn from its mistakes, to rebuild, and to progress, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. In the Thyxar worldview, where strength and stability were synonymous with survival, the unpredictability and adaptability of humanity were qualities they had not accounted for. Vey's breakdown of humanity's resilience in overcoming historical challenges, like pandemics, famines, and even their most destructive wars, served as a wake-up call for the Thyxars. The more they considered her points, the more they realized that humanity's greatest asset was its unyielding will to survive, not its physical strength or its advanced technology. They had underestimated this fundamental aspect of the human spirit. What had appeared as chaos and dysfunction to the Thyxars was, in fact, a testament to humanity's ability to adapt, evolve, and unite when faced with external threats. At the same time, Vey also emphasized humanity's unique capacity to innovate. While their technologies were not as advanced as the Thyxars, they had demonstrated a remarkable ability to harness the very forces that could have destroyed them. Humanity had developed technologies capable of mass destruction, yet they had also learned to manipulate the environment in ways that were far more complex than the Thyxars had realized. This duality of creation and destruction was a central part of humanity's character, something that Vey believed made them unpredictable and, therefore, dangerous. As the council members absorbed these points, their tone shifted. They began to understand that humanity's apparent weakness was, in fact, a mask for an incredible strength, one rooted not in their technological dominance or physical prowess, but in their unrelenting capacity to survive. The realization began to set in that humanity, unlike any species the Thyxars had encountered, possessed an unpredictable nature that could not be easily subdued. They were not like the species the Thyxars had previously conquered. They were a species whose greatest strength was their sheer determination and adaptability. The decisive moment came when Vey confidently declared that if pushed to the brink, humanity would unite against any external threat. This statement captured the attention of the council, particularly Recall, who for the first time seemed uncertain. He asked, "You believe they can unite in the face of an external threat?" His tone, once dismissive and sure, now carried a rare hesitation. Vey's simple response, yes, was all that was needed to plant the seed of doubt in the council's minds. If humanity could find a way to unite, they could become a force capable of overwhelming even the most powerful invaders. In that moment, the council members finally understood that humanity's unpredictability and resilience made them a far more formidable foe than they had ever imagined. For the first time, the Thyxar Council began to understand the true nature of humanity. The species that they had once seen as weak, divided, and doomed to self-destruction was now a species whose strength lay in its capacity to survive, adapt, and innovate, even in the most chaotic of circumstances. This realization not only cast doubt on the Thyxar's initial plans for Earth's conquest, but also planted the seeds for the possibility that humanity was a species that could never be truly conquered. Not through force, not through technology, and certainly not through underestimating their will to survive. This shift in the Thyxar Council's perspective was the beginning of a new understanding. Humanity might not just endure. They might, in fact, thrive in ways that would defy even the most powerful of conquerors.